very much, Ted. It's a great honor to be here, Ken, in the chamber. Thank you very much for having me again. All of you for coming. I apologize if I cough a little bit. I'm a bit under the weather, which is funny when you're at sunny Kelowna. But I shouldn't travel. That's the thing. If I never left Kelowna, I'd probably always be feeling good. I'd also probably never meet any New Democrats if I had left Kelowna. I want to talk to you about our budget today, and our budget is really about three things. The first one is about $1.6 billion in new spending that we've got in our budget to make sure that we are trying to make life a little more affordable for people around the province. The second I want to talk about is that we are finding money to put aside for a rainy day. Because, things are going well in British Columbia right now, but we sure must have learned when we look across the country right now that if we don't put money aside for a rainy day when it comes, we will regret it, only when it's too late. And the third thing is why it is we have the flexibility to be able to invest money in making life more affordable and invest money in a rainy day fund. And I want to start just talking about that first one if I can. Because that first one, the last one, the third one, why it is we're able to make these investments is really the story of British Columbia. It's the story of why right now in our province we are able to make a bigger contribution to building this country and to building Confederation than we ever have. Because we are leading. We are #1 in job growth. We created 50,000 jobs last year. We lead in job creation of any province in the country. And since 2008, since 2011, our economy has grown by a full 8%. That is my confirmation of why I think we're doing well. But let me give you the confirmation that we hear from some external sources, from the rating agencies, international sources. We are the only province in Canada today that is rated AAA stable. It's the highest credit rating that you can get. No one else in the country shares that distinction with us. And one of the credit agencies put it this way. They said that our economy is dependent on very strong management, a wealthy economy, and one that is very strong. And they said those things partly because we are able to run surpluses in a country where almost everybody else is running deficits. And because we're running surpluses, we have this distinction in British Columbia of being able to say to our kids, we are paying our way. Not only are we paying for the services that we need now and investing in more services, but we're paying down our debt and we're making sure that we leave something for our kids. And so now with this budget, we are able to say that we are going to be able to eliminate our operating debt in just 4 years for the first time since 1975. And that is the first step toward it. Well, it's the second step toward a debt-free BC. The first step is, of course, running a surplus. The second is investing that surplus and paying down debt and eliminating your operating debt. But I should say, with all of this good fortune that we have and the work that we're doing, we are still a long way from being debt-free. And now is not the time for us to take our eye off that ball. Because right now we are still spending $1.6 billion on debt repayments. But let me put that in context for you. If in British Columbia we had Ontario's credit rating, rather than paying $1.6 billion in debt repayment, we would be paying $4 billion in debt repayment. We would be paying today, with Ontario's credit rating and Ontario's fiscal management, almost 10% of our total budget to the banks in New York and London to look after paying off our debt. And we don't want to do that. And we've maintained our AAA credit rating, so it means that we have almost $2.5 billion more to spend on people. But I want you to know we do borrow. It's just that today we only borrow to build. We only borrow for the things that will be a legacy for our kids, lasting contributions to the province, not so that we can pay our grocery bill. And when I talk about the kinds of things that we borrow for, you see them all the time. You see it in West Side Road. You see it in the low-income housing. Jim. In West Side Road. Give it up. There we go. $60 million in West Side Road, Kelowna General Hospital improvements, new schools, UBCO, Okanagan College, all of those investments that we've made are part of the $20 billion that our government is spending, including with BC Hydro at Site C, in building infrastructure that is going to benefit generations of British Columbians to come. And along with those investments in BC Hydro, that is 17,000 jobs over the next 3 years. And just to note, because I often hear the opposition talk about how they support working people, but they don't support Site C. I think they only support working people if they're not working, which I'm not sure how that works. Because if you don't support Site C, then you don't support the 110,000 jobs that that's going to create over 30 years. 110,000 jobs. That's a lot of stability. That's a real future, real dignity, and real certainty for a lot of working people for a long time in British Columbia. And one of the things that we focused on while we continue to make those investments in infrastructure, while we continue to pay down debt and make investments in making life more affordable, the most important part of that is keeping taxes low. So we have the lowest taxes in Canada for anyone earning under $122,000. And because we recognize that the single most important thing any government can do to keep life affordable is to let you keep more of the money that you earn and let you decide how you're going to spend that money. So now I want to talk to you specifically about the 5 priorities that we set out in our budget. And these are the things that are focused on making life more affordable for people. The first one is investing $3.2 billion in the Ministry of Health this year over last. And that's going to help make sure that we continue to be #1 in Canada. We have the best health outcomes in Canada. We have the longest life expectancy. We also have beautiful Kelowna, which I'm sure contributes to that. It's not all the Ministry of Health. And we have the best cancer survival rates of anywhere in North America. And we want to make sure that we maintain that leadership by making these investments in the Ministry of Health. And just for some context, Mike DeYoung, who came to the legislature about 22 years ago, reminds us all that as our budget gets closer to $20 billion for the Ministry of Health, when he came to the legislature 22 years ago, it was $6 billion. That's the size and the growth we've seen in the investment in the Ministry of Health, and an investment that has certainly turned out to be well worth it, as we've seen the really positive outcomes in terms of certainly the statistics for people's health in the province. MSP premiums pay a very small portion of that total budget for the Ministry of Health, but nonetheless, they're important. But over the years, I would argue that the way we've structured MSP as it's grown up hasn't necessarily been very fair or very logical in the way that it's worked. So we're starting to make some changes to MSP. And this year, those changes will mean that 2 million out of the 4.5 million people in this province will no longer pay a penny in MSP premiums, no matter who you are. 2 million people won't pay. 335,000 will have much reduced premiums, and not a single parent in this province will pay for their children for MSP anymore. And what does all that mean? It means that for a single parent with 2 kids, they can save up to about $1,300 a year. A couple with 2 kids will save about $720 per year. A single senior will save up to $360 per year. And there are those who would argue that all of MSP should just be rolled into the tax system. And it does sound simple, but here's one of the obstacles for that. About 1 million people have their MSP paid by their employers. We roll it into the tax system. We're adding another 1 million people into paying MSP that currently aren't. We have more things to do to make MSP more fair, and we're going to continue to work on that, as we always do with all of the range of taxes and fees that government collects. But I think a good start is making sure that 2 million people in our province, almost 40% of our population, are excused entirely from having to make any payment at all. The second focus of affordability for us is what we've focused on a lot since I've become Premier, and that's your kids. If you have kids, you'll know, at least I hope you'll know, that we've established an RESP for them. And any child who was born in 2007 or later is eligible automatically, no questions asked, for a $1,200 MS or RESP payment that you can deposit that will grow, so that when your child is old enough to go to a post-secondary institution, they'll have a good start. They'll have some seed money to look after that tuition. Well, this year we're expanding that. We're going to cover another 40,000 kids. It's another investment of $39 million. So if you have a child that was born in 2006 or later, you will also be eligible to collect that $1,200 for your children. I can always tell who's got kids that were born in 2006 because they're always nodding in the room when I get there. We're never going to get to 2001, I don't think, which is when Hamish was born. If we do that, I'm sure the media will say I shouldn't have done it. It was a conflict of interest. Home affordability is the third area we wanted to really focus on, because that's been a real issue around the province, especially in the Lower Mainland, where we've really seen a very, very hot housing market. Been a hot one here over the years at different times in the Okanagan, and heating up again, I'm glad to know. Lots of realtors are telling me that they're very, very busy. The first part of that is the biggest investment we have ever made in the history of the province at one time in affordable housing, $355 million in affordable housing, and that's a range of supports. So that includes housing that we will be building, 2,000 units. It will include housing that we are renovating, and it will include support for people to stay in their own homes, because a lot of people who are struggling with housing costs don't want the government to give them a new home. They want to be able to stay in their current home, but they can't necessarily, maybe because their income is shrinking or their rent is growing, they can't afford it. And those rent supplements that government's able to provide have been a lifeline for thousands and thousands, especially of seniors, all across the province. And we're going to expand that with this big new investment that we're making in affordability. And as of yesterday, all new housing up to $750,000 will be 100% exempt from the property transfer tax. And the bulk of that, and as you know, if you live in the Okanagan, the bulk of the homes in this region of the province will be exempt, because so many of them are listed under $750,000. And with that change, it means that buyers will be saving up to about $13,000 each. And here's how we're paying for that. We're paying for it with a luxury tax on high-end homes over $2 million, with a new additional 3%, a tax will go by 1% to 3% on taxes over $2 million. All of that money on those most expensive homes in the market will be transferred back to people who are buying a new home anywhere in British Columbia. We're also expanding the seniors' home renovation tax credit. We're increasing the homeowner grant threshold. And we are calling on local governments around the province to work with us to make sure that we're increasing supply. So one of the reasons that we focused on supporting, on making sure that new homes, the purchase of new homes, had an increased exemption from the property purchase tax, is because we wanted to make sure that we help increase supply. One of the problems, especially in the Lower Mainland, where there's been such incredible activity, has been the terrible imbalance of supply and demand. There has just been not enough supply and way too much demand. Local governments need to get focused on making sure that they increase the supply that's there to help provide more balance in that market. And equally, as the province backs off on the taxes that we levy on homes and the taxes that we add to the total cost for home buyers, so do local governments. We're going to make sure that we increase transparency in buyers' contracts, so that they can see from all levels of government what the federal taxes are, what provincial taxes are, and what local taxes are through ACCs and DCCs. Because every buyer deserves to know how much governments are adding to their burden when they decide to buy a home. We are also going to require, again, something that used to be done in British Columbia for a long time, until the late 1990s, that when people buy property in British Columbia, they disclose whether or not they are a citizen or a permanent resident, and if they are neither of those, to disclose their citizenship and the country that they're from when they buy. The last thing I want to say about the real estate market is this, because I suspect there are a lot of realtors in the room today, and thank you to you for all the work that you do in growing our economy and keeping British Columbia so busy. You are the front face of, along with Big White and our restaurants and our hotels, you are the front face of our province in selling who we are to people around the world. But there have been a few ugly stories about unscrupulous operators, especially down in Vancouver, who I think are besmirching the good reputation of realtors all across the province. So we've asked the BC Real Estate Council to report to us by April 15th on their investigation of what's going on out there, to make sure that everybody truly is following the rules. And if people aren't following the rules, we will ensure that they're penalized. Because this industry has no room for people who don't operate above and according to the rules. Because almost all of you do. You value your reputation, and it matters in your business. And we are going to do everything we can to help you protect that. We also want to make sure we make significant investments in helping those who are vulnerable in British Columbia. Governments are judged, and societies are judged on how well we look after those who need our help and need a hand up. So the Ministry of Children and Family Development is going to be receiving another $217 million over 3 years to support the most vulnerable children among us, to make sure that they get the best start that they can in making sure that they find their way through life and into adulthood. We saw a recent report from Rob Plekas that we commissioned. It recommended that government inject another $50 million into the ministry this year. We're taking that a step further, making it $65.5 million in new money. The Ministry of Social Development and Social Innovation, receiving almost $500 million. That includes a $170 million increase for income assistance for people with disabilities. That's the first increase that people with disabilities have received in our province since 2007, and that's going to affect over 100,000 people. It's about time that we got there. We have the flexibility to do it because we've looked after the fundamentals. And people with disabilities should be doing better, and we're going to do our best to make sure that they are. And last, the other thing, the other point that I alluded to at the beginning that's really important in our budget is the idea that we want to put money aside. Because we are having great days here in British Columbia, or good days at the very least, certainly better than most of the rest of the country. And I think we have an obligation in good times to put money aside for our kids. And it's true that the global slowdown in oil prices has meant that LNG is not on its original timeline, and it's not moving forward as fast as we thought it would. But it's still going ahead, because success is not for quitters. Vision for the future and changing your future, it does not mean running the white flag up the flagpole the first time you see a problem. We will get there on LNG. World demand is going to continue to grow as demand for clean energy and sources of energy in general continues to grow, but we're not there yet. But in the meantime, we're still running surpluses. And so I'm proud to say that despite that global slowdown, the budget 2016 includes the very first deposit into British Columbia's Prosperity Fund of $100 million put aside for our kids. And as I said, when times are better, we have this obligation, I think, to make sure that we take that money out of the checking account and put it into the savings account. Because we don't know, just as they didn't know in Alberta, just as they didn't know in Ontario or Quebec, necessarily what the world economy would bring next. But if you want to know why it is that we've been able to make these kinds of investments in people and in savings, if you want to know why it is that our school enrollment is up in British Columbia for the first time in decades, if you want to know why it is that 13,000 Canadians in just the last 3 quarters have crossed the Rockies to look for jobs in British Columbia, why 38,000 people from around the world in the last year have come from around the globe to join us here in British Columbia, 50,000 people who have voted with their feet have come because we are working so hard to get our fundamentals right. They've come because we're investing $7.5 billion in education. And not just investing it, but examining how we're investing it. Making sure that we're deploying that money in our high school system so that more children get access to trades training so that they're jobs ready when they graduate from high school. Investing that money and making sure that all kids who finish elementary school know that universal language of coding and can be part of the new economy if they choose when they're done school. Making sure that university degrees that are tech related include co-op training so that students are out in the private sector before they finish their degree and want to join it full time. It's why we established a $100 million tech fund to support the tech industry and startups here in Kelowna and all across the province. It's why we're allocating $5 million to build new markets in India, which also boasts the world's biggest middle class. And it's why we have worked so hard to achieve labor peace with our public sector. 250,000 public sector workers, 80% of everybody who works for us, is now settled their agreements, has reached labor peace, including the longest period of labor peace we have ever had in public schools in British Columbia's history, with a 5-year agreement with the BCTF. People are coming because the grass is literally greener in British Columbia. People are coming because they see we are growing, and we need people to grow. We want people to come to British Columbia. Do you remember when Ralph Klein used to say, if you want to get welfare, here's a bus pass, go to British Columbia? Well, now we are in the enviable position of being able to say to Albertans, come to British Columbia, get on a bus, get in your car, bring your truck, come to British Columbia. Don't come and get welfare, come to British Columbia and get a job. And for many Albertans, we're able to say, welcome home. We're glad to have you back. It's been a long time. We know you missed your family. We know you missed Kelowna. And we look forward to seeing you be able to build your long-term future in Canada's strongest economy. But let me finish with this, because as I said at the beginning, we're doing well, but now is not the time for us to take our eye off the ball. I mean, we see what's happening, we certainly see what's happening in Alberta, our closest friend and neighbor, just getting hammered by what's going on with oil prices. We see in China, one of our biggest trading partners, stock markets are closing without notice. We see the United States still slowly emerging from their recession. In Ontario, which is widely considered to be Canada's economic engine, they are laboring under the largest sub-sovereign debt on the globe. They have a bigger debt per capita in Ontario than even in California. Those are warning signs that every Canadian needs to heed. And so when I say we need to keep our eyes on the ball, I really mean it. Because we've worked hard and we've been very focused, but there is no time where it's been more important that we stay focused than now, because it's never going to be harder than in this next year ahead. Making sure that we remain balanced and that we have the flexibility to invest in people and put away money for a rainy day requires 100, maybe 1,000 different decisions being made every single day. For the women in the room, some of you'll relate to this. Maybe not as well as I do, but it's like going on a diet. Every day you have to make every decision right if you want to be able to reach your goal. It's like that in government. If you want to put government on a diet, make sure government shrinks a little bit and that it's not getting bigger than the economy, you have to make every decision and you have to make it right. And that's the hard part of being in government in an almost $50 billion business. But it's something that we can do. We're going to stay focused on making sure we get our fundamentals right. We're going to stay focused on making sure we can put money aside for a rainy day. and that we have money left over to make sure we try and make life more affordable for the citizens of our province. Because we believe, rather than just making poverty easier for people to live in, that as government and as a society we have an obligation to try and do everything we can to lift people out of poverty forever. We believe that we can make health services and education services not just more expensive, that we can deliver them by investing more money, we can deliver them better and get better outcomes. We believe that the way to make British Columbia better is not to make government bigger, it's to make the economy and the private sector bigger. And fundamentally, we know that the way to make the economy bigger is not to say no to everything. It's to say yes. It's to try and find a way to get to building new things, to finding new ways to grow the economy, encouraging entrepreneurship, and creating growth all across the province. And those results are good so far. But as David Brooks in the New York Times noted yesterday, I think, or the day before, the world is filled with cynics. The world is filled with opponents and naysayers, the forces of no, those who will talk, everything they talk about reeks of fear and cynicism and despair, cloudy days in the future, pessimism all around, and all the reasons why everything's not going to work. Well, that is not what built British Columbia. And that is not what built any one of your businesses, nonprofits, or enterprises. What built what you run and what you work with every single day, what built this province was hope. It was optimism. It was ambition. It was audaciousness. Those are the things that should govern us as we look forward in British Columbia. We lead because we have optimism. We lead because we have hope. Because we turn away from fear, we turn away from pessimism, we turn away from no, and instead we make British Columbia the place in Canada where we believe in yes. That's why we're number one, and that's why we are going to continue to lead this country in the year ahead as well. Thank you very much.